Eyes Wide Shut was Kubrick's final warning. The climax of the movie revolves around a ritualistic orgy for the rich and powerful. At the time, it was seen as a dream sequence out of line with reality. Something just insane and like from a horror movie. But then, just a few years later, this footage of an elite pagan ritual was released to the public. This was secretly filmed at the Bohemian Grove, an infamous meeting palace for power brokers and future presidents. Bohemian Grove is clearly something that freaked out Kubrick deeply. And while Bohemian Grove has long been a source of conspiracy theories, some more convincing than others, one thing that is clear is that it's a place where the powerful gather away from prying eyes, despite its official motto of weaving spiders come not here. Not many photos or films exist of it, but it's been an institution for decades. This photo shows a group of powerful men including the future presidents Nixon and Reagan attending a meeting at the Grove. In the Nixon tape, secret recordings of private meetings were taken without his knowledge, as Nixon talks about the Grove here.
Let's look at Northern California. You understand? Yeah. But it isn't just down in the ratty part of town. But the upper class in San Francisco is that way. The Bohemian Grove that I attend from time to time. But it is the most goddamn thing you will ever imagine in San Francisco crowd because it's just terrible. I mean, I don't want to shake hands with anybody in San Francisco.
The ritual in the film mirrors exactly what's said to happen at Bohemian Grove, which revolves around a massive owl statue, an ancient pagan symbol of wisdom and hidden knowledge. It's actually the representation of an ancient god called Molech, who is synonymous with child sacrifice. Then a few years after the film was released, a young Alex Jones of all people infiltrated the Bohemian Grove and managed to film part of what looks like a ritual sacrifice. In the grainy video, we can see people gathered around the statue with candles or lights in their hands. The footage is so uncanny because it's exactly the same ritual in Eyes Wide Shut. In fact, you'd be forgiven for thinking that Kubrick had actually been there to see it with his own eyes. Then, throughout the last 2 decades, even more of Eyes Wide Shut has come true. From the opening of the film to its chilling conclusion, Eyes Wide Shut is full of warnings. This video is sponsored by Agent Opus. You see, most AI video tools I've ever used always have the same problem. They can generate visuals, but they don't understand what you're actually trying to say. So you end up with something that looks impressive for a few seconds, but it doesn't really hold together. The pacing feels off, the visuals don't match the message, and it's not something you'd ever actually post. Which is why many famous influencers and myself are now using Agent Opus, as they're built around fixing that. Instead of starting with random visuals, it starts with your input, your voice, your script, your idea, and builds a full video around it. With their story mode, you can take something simple like a voice note, a script, or a podcast clip, drop it in, choose a style, and it generates a short video where everything stays aligned from start to finish. So if you're explaining something, breaking down a topic, or even promoting something, the visuals actually follow the story instead of fighting it. It also adds captions, background music, and motion graphics automatically, so the output feels much closer to something you'd actually publish. Which is why so many people are now using this to turn podcast clips into short form videos, adding visual layers to longer content, or just to create a quick promo video that doesn't feel generic. If you want to try it, Agent Opus is live now. Go to opus.pro/agent using the link in the description below. One of these warnings is the use of masks throughout the movie. Kubrick was absolutely obsessed with the use of masks here, and it's also something that Epstein was obsessed with. Many of the photos and the stories in the Epstein files involve them. Most creepily, there are pictures of this room on the island. This dentist chair itself, an object with potentially dark implications, is surrounded by these strange masks attached to the walls, like they're watching. And you can easily imagine someone in that chair surrounded by masks and masked people. Through characters that seem too identical to him to be coincidental, Kubrick showed us how that world operates. The initiation rituals in the film mirror his tactics of sexual blackmail. Once they've got you compromised, you're part of the conspiracy and your silence is guaranteed by lethal consequences for you and your family. In fact, it's almost impressive that so much of his commentary on that world stayed in this movie. Somehow it was released in a time when no one had any idea of what was really going on behind closed doors. In light of the Epstein files, among other things, there's been renewed debate around how much Warner Bros. And Hollywood actually changed Kubrick's final film. We now know that they added in CGI figures to obscure the famous ritual scene, but did they cut anything else? What was left on the cutting room floor that we never got to see that was perhaps a warning? It's a valid question because Kubrick wasn't around to oversee its actual release. As winter turned to spring in the year 1999, Stanley Kubrick was almost finished. Decades of planning, years of sacrifices, and the longest continuous shoot in film history had all led up to this moment. This was the culmination of Stanley Kubrick's entire life's work, the most important message and warning he could give to the wider public. But just days after showing Eyes Wide Shut to Warner Bros. Executives, Stanley Kubrick was found dead. When the film was released some 4 months later, the great director's final masterpiece met with mixed reviews. Some critics heaped on their praises, but others called it dated, and a lot of people just found it very peculiar and strange. It had a very deeply unsettling feeling to it. It's almost impossible to imagine this being shown in cinemas today. Which is why with everything we know today though, it feels more prophetic than ever. Stanley Kubrick's exploration of elite depravity and the ultra-powerful becomes more relevant with every new file dump. And as we'll cover in this video, we see the warnings in the hidden details of the film itself, as well as in the story behind the story, how Stanley Kubrick had spent the last decade of his life working on his final masterpiece and what really happened in the immediate aftermath of his death. Despite being acknowledged as the greatest director of all time by industry insiders, Stanley Kubrick was highly suspicious of Hollywood. Ever since the 60s, he had detached himself from California, often choosing to create entirely new sets in London instead. This was especially true for Eyes Wide Shut. Stanley Kubrick had been obsessed with a novel called Dream Story since at least the 1960s, even earlier by some accounts, but other projects always got in the way, or maybe he didn't feel ready to properly tackle it. It wasn't until the decades passed, he experienced things we can only imagine, and saw the true realities of how the elites work, that Kubrick began working on the film in 1994, dropping all of his other projects simply to focus on this. First came the screenplay. Like in 2001 or A Clockwork Orange, Kubrick had always adapted the work of others. He was a photographer before he was a filmmaker, and his main talents lay in the visual world. And you see, Eyes Wide Shut was no different, and he hired the acclaimed author Friedrich Raphael to adapt the Dream Story into a screenplay. This took over a year and tons of drafts. Dream Story is set in pre-war Vienna, so Kubrick wanted to modernize it, setting it in the 1990s New York instead, and it was Raphael's job to make this happen. It was a long, grueling process, and eventually, most of Raphael's changes never made it even into the film. Yet, with one exception, the character of Victor Ziegler. He's the main antagonist, representative of the world of sexual depravity, power, money, and blackmail, which the rest of the film hints at. If Epstein was ever in the question, Ziegler is his counterpart. Ziegler makes concrete what was left up to speculation in Dream Story. The masked orgy which Bill attends becomes a clear part of a wider conspiracy of powerful people. Ziegler's most telling line comes towards the end of the movie. Those were not just ordinary people there. If I told you their names, I'm not going to tell you their names, but if I did, I don't think you would sleep so well. Ziegler actually looks similar to Epstein, and he fulfills pretty much the exact same role that Epstein did in real life. In the film, he's at least a level above Bill. Bill is a working man. He may have reached the top of regular society as a respected doctor, but he still exists as a normal person with a salary and an apartment that looks like a regular family home. Ziegler is above that. He has a massive house and decadent parties. His house doesn't even look lived in at all in any of its scenes. In fact, the house is incredibly similar to Epstein's old New York mansion. At his party at the start of the film, we also see two characters in the background, but they're clear enough to make out their faces. Their resemblance to how Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell would have looked at the time is striking. Ziegler is also representative of the cult of powerful people. In the rest of this scene, he plays the role perfectly. He's both reassuring and threatening. He talks to Bill like he has his best interests at heart, like he's trying to protect him, weaving him a story about how nobody was really hurt because of his actions. The girl that seemingly saved Bill from the cult died because she was an addict, and it was bound to happen. The jazz pianist that Bill manipulated to get into the cult's ritual is apparently safe with his family. He definitely hasn't been kidnapped or murdered, even though Ziegler refers to him in the past tense in this scene. These are almost certainly convenient lies. Bill has seen the dead woman himself. He knows from talking to regular people that the pianist was kidnapped and beaten. But the subtext is clear. Submit to these lies or I won't be able to protect you, and your family will face the consequences. Which is why Bill ends up completely defeated. But the subtext is clear. Submit to these lies or I won't be able to protect you, and your family will also face the consequences. Bill ends up completely defeated. Other changes that Raphael and Kubrick made point to real-world secret societies, namely the infamous Skull and Bones. It's an organization shrouded in mystery, but with lots of confirmed, incredibly powerful members. You've got presidents stretching from Taft in the late 1800s all the way to George Bush. In fact, both of the nominees for the 2004 election were so-called Bonesmen. Other confirmed members are powerful judges, congressmen, senators, media moguls, and anyone else in positions of authority. It's often said, although it's never been truly confirmed, that the society operates through a system of mutual sexual blackmail revolving around depraved rituals and confessions. At one point in the movie, Bill is threatened by some frat boys as he walks along the street. It's a sequence that was altered from the novel. Kubrick made sure to indicate that they're from Yale based on their clothes. You can read it as foreshadowing. They represent the greater threat that the film's secret society makes on his life. Outside of that, there are other similarities. The blackmail element of Eyes Wide Shut also mirrors reality. These secret societies and elite groups nearly all use these tactics to ensure the silence and compliance of their members. It's all in the initiation ritual. There are reports of new Bonesmen having to tell the rest of society about their sexual secrets while they lie still in a coffin. Similar reports exist for British high society. David Cameron, the ex-Prime Minister, was once accused of having had intercourse with the head of a dead pig, all at the initiation ceremony for the Piers Gaveston Society. And, funnily enough, David Cameron did not sue the well-connected accusers as he was too busy running the country. Other elements of how Kubrick made this film also pointed to clear warnings. For the two main characters, he cast the celebrity power couple of Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. While they're obviously both great actors, it was a strange decision in some way. They both have their own cultish backgrounds, Tom Cruise and his history with Scientology. Even at the time, rumors were flying about how Kubrick was going to integrate this real-life element into his own film about cults. Maybe he thought their authentic background would give them the experience they needed to make their roles come to life. Later on, after the public saw the film, the questions continued. In a press conference, the pair were asked if they wanted to talk about any of the rumors surrounding the film and their casting. It's a strange moment. The two start talking about some of the more ridiculous tabloid rumors, and then when they're about to move on to more substantial claims about psychiatry, they both clam up and go quiet.
Well, there were a lot of them. It's hard to say which one was the most.
Yes, and then we actually had the psychiatry board at one stage outraged at that, yes. It was interesting, actually, and this was anyway, I'm talking too much. You talk.
No, you're not. No. That's what they hear. They want to hear you.
Exactly.
Jan and Tom, talk a bit, please.
Nicole's avoidant answer here, her refusal to talk about specifics, and Tom's complete silence are incredibly telling. Although this could have been because they just walked into a landmine laid by Cruise's Scientology connections, as Scientology does see psychiatry as its #1 enemy, and Cruise, the face of Scientology, shares these beliefs. Years later, he would even give an explosive interview about psychiatry, obviously with the angle that Scientology's religious methods are the correct alternative. But above all, his immersion in the world of cults made sure that Tom always knows when to keep his mouth shut on certain topics, like he does here. Other than Ziegler, the new setting and some small other changes, the script was mostly unchanged from Dream's story. Kubrick would build the rest of the movie on top of it. As always, he controlled every tiny detail, and the cinematography was possibly the best of all of his films. The lighting was the key. By using his own sets, Kubrick could perfectly control every single light source, tone, color, and shadow. In lots of scenes, he used the low wattage Christmas lights as the main lighting, almost too dim to illuminate the scene. Then, in post-production, Kubrick had the film slightly overdeveloped. The result of this technique is spectacular. The lamps and the lights in the film seem to glow brighter, while the subject stays soft and warm. It's what gives the film its dreamy feel, like Bill is sleepwalking into his own doom. The lights even play a role in the film's hidden meanings. Blue often represents the outside, the place where Bill occupies before he gains entrance to the cult. Red represents the inside, the true nature of desire and power. The cult, its red-clothed leader, and Ziegler's red-felted pool table. Every scene has a Christmas tree in it, every scene except the ritual scene. There, it's replaced by the ritual, the mockery of a Catholic mass where the women are distributed among the masked men as the red-robed figure spreads incense smoke. In the background, the song Masked Ball by Jocelyn Poog plays. On first watching, it seems like it's just nonsense or maybe some strange unknown language. Only by playing it in reverse you hear the true meaning. It's a recording of a Romanian liturgy. It's a clear allusion to Satanism, but it's unclear whether Kubrick was outwardly indicating that this is the true nature of these cults, or if he was just parodying the established beliefs people had about them. Kubrick chose to film parts of the scene in the former mansion of the Rothschilds. He could have chosen almost any of the hundreds of stately homes and country manors in the UK, but he chose that specific one for the key shots. As one of the most significant and important families in history, the Rothschilds have been pulling the strings of the world order for literally centuries, and Kubrick definitely knew this. In scenes other than the ritual, Kubrick points towards some of the female characters being underage, or goes the other way compared to the novel he was adapting. The character of Domino is written as 17 years old in the original novel. In Eyes Wide Shut, she is older though and less naive. On the other hand, the costume store owner's daughter and their bizarre scenes are clearly alluding to something. She looks incredibly young, and the actress was around 16 years old at the time of filming, perhaps even younger. These parts of the movie seem unconnected to the Secret Society plotline at first. Especially when this was first released in cinemas, people pointed to this as evidence that depravity exists at all layers of society. But now, with everything we know about the elites and how they operate, this is definitely connected. The two models at the beginning of the film are key. They're attendants of Ziegler's Christmas party, and they gravitate towards Bill. In many ways, they're his first temptation, although it gets interrupted. When they talk to Bill, they ask him, "Don't you want to go where the rainbow ends?" The costume shop itself is called Rainbow Costume Rental. The place where the rainbow ends is where Bill is eventually offered the underage girl. This was also seemingly the final element of Epstein's blackmail cult and the games he played with other elites. And we can imagine that Stanley Kubrick was aware of many more other characters just like Epstein. And you can actually easily read the whole film as just being a setup by the cult, every single aspect of it. The legendary director and screenwriter Roger Avery believes that the final edit we saw wasn't what Kubrick intended.
Just thinking, I just pulled my script from Eyes Wide Shut. I had a script that was from set, and I was reading it over the weekend, and I saw that it has this, I mean, I've known this for a long time, but I started really thinking about it over the weekend. It's missing a narration. It's missing a third-person narration that was originally in the movie. And that's because the movie was recut.
Lots of sparse scenes that seem like they're meant to be atmospheric may have actually been blank to allow for that narration. That missing narration may have spelt out Kubrick's warnings even more concretely as well.
Say that Kubrick finished the movie because they hadn't done the recording of the narrator yet. And so maybe they just kind of kludged it together, except there's an entire thread that's kind of been squashed in that film, and that's the two men that are throughout the movie that are constantly in the background of the film, who eventually in the final shots of the film you see, like Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman in that final scene in the toy store when she's looking at the Rosemary's Baby bassinet, which is totally Kubrick saying something, and they never take their eyes off their daughter until the moment they take their eyes off and the final line of the movie is coming up. You see those two guys walking off with the daughter. They're taking her away. They've given their daughter to the pedo cult. That's what's happened at the end of the movie. And there's an incident where when they first screened the movie in England, people who were outside, this is all secondhand, by the way. There were people who were outside of the theater who could hear inside of the theater Kubrick yelling at all the executives and saying, "It's my movie, you can't cut it. You can't fucking cut my film, blah, 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 blah." Big argument going on. Then he dies like 4 days later.
It's also just one instance of two men kidnapping someone or being involved in something terrible. They're the two men from the rainbow costume store with the young girl, and they're the two men who take away the pianist off screen. But like with all of these things, they are outright denied by the people on the inside of the industry, the people who made the final edit to the film. Other people stayed completely quiet. Even Quentin Tarantino, a man who loves to talk, was very strangely silent when Avery was talking about this. With all of these warnings both hidden and out in the open, it's insane that people thought that the film was anything but an expose on this whole elite world. Just like the title says, people's eyes are wide shut, and despite Kubrick showing everything clear as day, everyone still failed to see the reality of it. We've already seen the theories about whether we even saw the final cut or if the studios got their chance to interfere. But really, it doesn't even matter. There's more than enough there to warn people, it's all in plain view. And despite their attempts, people can now see that these messages were always there. And then we need to talk about one of the most important things about this movie, the rumors surrounding Kubrick's death. It's a very strange coincidence that Stanley Kubrick died just days after showing the studios this film. Ali Army also said something that doesn't line up with the rest of Kubrick's friends and family on this. Quote, "We had a long conversation about Eyes Wide Shut. He told me it was a piece of shit and that he was disgusted with it and that the critics were going to have him for lunch. He said Cruise and Kidman had their way with him, exactly the words he used." This goes against what other people have said though. His daughter has said for years that this film was the one Kubrick intended on making, that it was finished and that everyone loved it. Plus, Kubrick was a tired man at this point who had worked himself to the bone for decades on the films. Maybe these explanations sound like the ones Ziegler gave Bill to explain away his doubts in the film, but they do also seem plausible. Of course, the film wasn't just about cults and the ultra-powerful either. It was also about the psychological motivations, desires, and contradictions that guide people towards them in the first place. Bill's central angst surrounding his wife's desire is the key. It's what drives him on his dark adventure and puts him at the mercy of the cult. It's his own lust for power and being included in the upper world of depravity that made him vulnerable. It's this interplay between the wider society and the individual motivations that make the film so deep. Kubrick's final warning then was that both of these worlds exist, but they also can only exist because of the weakness and depravity of individual people. While your own virtue isn't enough to dismantle these shadowy layers of society, it will potentially protect you from their manipulations.